How's it going, everyone? What you're going to be seeing here today is another Krieg build that focuses on melee and Buzz-Axe Rampage. But the key to this build and why I like it so much and why I've been experimenting with it is it gives you incredible versatility. If you're the type that likes to rush in completely, with reckless abandon, just meleeing everything, meleeing through an incredible mob of people, not even looking what's to your left and right flanks and just meleeing anything you can do this. If you're the type that prefers survivability, you can do this. If you're the type that likes to throw grenades, say, to knock out shields and wear down enemies while building up bloodlust stacks and use melee as your cleanup, again, you can do this. Basically, doing it this way too, you won't have to tamper with the tree at all. You can leave the tree exactly the same, and the only things that'll be changing are your class mods, your weapons, if you choose to use them, your grenades, and your shields. But basically, this tree gives you the option of taking your time, rushing in with reckless abandon, or, well, just choosing survivability so that your melee damage output does take a bit of a hit. But at the same time, you can literally laugh when a badass enemy hits you 4 or 5 times and it does next to nothing to you. So again, versatility is key to the build, and you'll see multiple examples in the video in the background of me taking the survivability route, taking the reckless abandon route, taking pretty much everything you can do with this build. Anyway, you can and I'll explain everything as we go, but basically you can mix and match all of the types that I show you in the video. But the examples that I tend to give you mix really well, but again, you can mix it up for yourself. Now I'll break down the tree. Basically, obviously, you're going to want your point in Buzz-Axe Rampage, and your next 5 are going to be in Bloodlust. They'll be in blood-filled guns. Magazine size for all weapons increased for each stack of Bloodlust. You're not going to be using weapons much with this build, but that's not the point. The key is to increase Bloodlust stacks, and 5 points in this gives you 100. That's key. Next one's Taste of Blood. During Buzz-Axe Rampage, all damage you suffer is reduced. 50% damage reduction. And each kill you get in Buzz-Axe Rampage adds an extra 30 stacks. So it's a quick way of building it up. Now the next skill is a kill skill. It's called Bloodbath, where killing an enemy with a grenade or explosion increases weapon damage. And you're probably thinking, since we're not using weapons, why is that a useful skill? But the key here isn't so much the weapon damage, it's the grenade drop chance. You get a 75% chance of getting a grenade to drop if you kill an enemy this way using this skill. This one here, and you can respec 5 points somewhere else if you choose, but this skill here particularly is for those that like to throw grenades, knock out shield, build up bloodlust stacks, and use melee as a cleanup. If you're more patient, you can use that. I personally sometimes switch up my play style as I go. Sometimes I'm the reckless, run into a building, don't worry about anything and just melee everything to death. And other times I'll sit back, throw grenades, build up stacks, wear down their health, and then go in and clean them up through Release the Beast. This skill basically gives you the option of patience. I absolutely love this skill, and there's no way I wouldn't use it on my build. Because obviously, even if sometimes you accidentally use Buzz-Axe Rampage and you wait too early, or you jump into it too early before Release the Beast is available, when you get out of that, not only is your health, or not only is your Buzz-Axe Rampage not going to be recharged, but you'll have to maybe build up stacks again. And doing so with Bloodbath is key. Next 5 points is in Fuel the Blood. Killing an enemy with melee increases grenade damage. So again, this one also works with Bloodbath. But at the same time, you can increase Bloodlust stacks. Again, key to the build if you're patient. You don't need it, but I personally absolutely love this skill. Next point's Boiling Blood, next 4 actually, increases the time for Bloodlust stacks to decay. Key part. Blood Trance. Duration of Buzz-Axe Rampage is increased for each stack of Bloodlust. Never a problem. And everyone's favorite, Blood Explosion. Killing an enemy causes them to explode with an elemental nova matching the type of damage that killed it. Any overkill damage is also added to damage caused by an elemental nova. Everyone's already seen it. You kill an enemy with a lot of overkill damage, and if you have them in a chain, that overkill damage causes the next enemy to explode. That increases next. That's multiplied next. Next thing you know, you're clearing out a room of like 5-6 enemies in just one kill. Blood Explosion's amazing. Next 5 points in the mania tree are Empty the Rage because it increases melee damage. Next 5 points are in Feed the Meat for maximum health and Shield Recharge Delay increased. Now, if you choose the Hide of Terramorphous, because for this build, you'll be seeing it a lot. I primarily choose the Love Thumper as my shield, and that thing takes like 5 minutes to recharge, even if you aren't taking damage. You sacrifice a bit of Nova, but it's so easy. You never have to worry about knocking out your shield or anything of the sort. So I primarily use the Love Thumper, so with that information you obviously know that putting 5 points in Embrace the Pain is pretty much useless. That being said, if I also use, say, the Rough Rider again, 5 points would be useless here. If you are going to be the type that likes to rush in and melee with Reckless Abandon with the Hide of Terra, you can take 5 points out of, say, Bloodbath and throw it into Embrace the Pain. But again, I feel it's more versatile this way, doing it my way here. Strip the Flesh is explosive elemental damage increase that helps for your grenades. You can put a point into Light the Fuse and Redeem the Soul. That way it increases fight for your lifetime, and everyone already knows Light the Fuse. You can explode yourself or throw bundles of dynamite at the enemy, but I feel a rocket launcher or even, say, using a rapier when you're close to a guy is more effective. You have more control that way, and you don't have to worry about when you're up against a badass enemy. You're going to want 5 Insult the Wound. Melee damage per stacks increased, max stacks of 20. Can't help you, can't hurt you there. Now, Silence the Voices, I put 5 points in. This one's controversial. My previous build, I didn't put any points in it at all because I hate the fact that it's a random number generator and the fact that you pretty much have a chance of downing yourself instead of the enemy killing you. It's controversial, but I've warmed up a bit to it. Basically because if you put a class mod with another 5-6 points into it, you have like 500% increased melee damage. But the key is, if you put points into this, you don't necessarily have to hit people with it. Like, yeah, you can just continually throw your Buzz Axe and you still get the melee damage, especially if you didn't spec into Buzz Axe Bombardier over on the Bloodlust tree. And again, actually, that's a good point while I'm at it here. If you throw a point into Buzz Axe Bombardier, having Strip the Fletch would increase the explosive element damage to it. But Silence the Voices, I personally have warmed up to. Sometimes I will down myself, which sucks. But if I manage to get back up, then I, unleash a lot of hell, and I probably won't down myself for a bit again, ideally. But sacrificing 500 melee damage when you can throw your Buzz Axe, I can't do it. And Release the Beast is obviously key to the skill. Release the Beast is activated when you're below 33% of your health, and doing so not only replenishes your health back to full, but when you get out of your Buzz Axe Rampage, your kill skill's ready to go. It increases your melee damage by 100% and your damage reduction by 50. Huge part of the build. If you're focusing on melee and you don't have that skill in there, your tree's basically a waste. Now, overall, with regard to this skill tree breakdown, it gives you the option of survivability if you choose the Crunch mod, blue or purple, because it buffs Taste of Blood, Blood Trance, and Strip the Flesh, depending on which mod you have. If you team that up with the Rough Rider shield and its 20% damage reduction, and team that up with the Resistance Relic, which is more damage reduction, activating the Release the Beast, more damage reduction, 50%. It reduces the overall damage you take incredibly, drastically. You can literally walk into a room full of enemies, all hit you, and you can laugh at them. You could take on several hits from a badass enemy before anything starts to even run down your health meter. The only downside to it being that it's going to take several more hits to down an enemy because you're sacrificing melee damage for survivability. Your second option is to forego survivability entirely and focus on max melee damage with a Sickle class mod, again blue or purple, that will buff melee damage. It'll buff Silence the Voices, Empty the Rage, or Fuel the Blood, depending on which one you have. If you prefer patience before smashing everything, buffing Grenades is there for you as well, which would buff Fuel the Blood. In this case, melee would be your form of cleanup, the more patient route I was talking about earlier. If you prefer meleeing everything, you could spec out of grenade buff skills. But I personally vary in my tempo playing, despite staying in the same skill tree build. So I like having those skills even if I don't fully utilize them at times. The downside to this setup is that silence the voices can pop up at inopportune times. You'll hit yourself and maybe down yourself. And at the same time, you do reduce a bit of your survivability, meaning you can't really take as many shots. You have to continually kill to regenerate your health. Now, with regard to grenades, if you prefer the patient route, I use the longbow stormfronts to build up bloodlust stacks and strip shields off the enemy. You can use a slag singularity to bunch enemies up, slag them at the same time, and clean them up through melee, or you can use a slag O negative. This is good for health regeneration, but it's the only downside to it is if you want to be in Release the Beast most of the time, using a slag O negative is going to continually regenerate your health and make it a bit more difficult to get into Release the Beast. It can be situation dependent though. Now the shield I use, like I say, when I choose the melee routes, the Love Thumper or the Hide of Terra. Mostly the Love Thumper, based on the exact skill tree build I have now. And for robots, which I give an example of in the video as well. But if you're the type that likes to maximize melee damage, you're going to want these two shields. The Rough Rider in itself is more for survivability. But if you choose the survivability route, definitely go with the Rough Rider, because it's great for quick buzz axe rampages or release the beast, and it increases your like I was talking about, it increases your survivability exponentially, but with the 20% damage reduction teamed with everything else. But again, the downside is less melee damage. The relics I prefer, if you're choosing the survivability route, are Skin of the Ancients with ideally a non-elemental resistance tier to it. If you want the melee part, you're going to want Might of the Sephiroths for the melee damage. Again, it switches depending on if you want max DPS or survivability. If you prefer to throw your Buzz Axe Rampage, use the Seraph Badge. Don't ask me how that works, but I know it does. It increases the amount of times you can throw it. Of course, you can add your own if you wish to. Lastly, for weapons, you're going to want the Rapier and maybe the Ruby if, say, you accidentally went into your skill of Buzz Axe Rampage without Release the Beast and then you're waiting for it to recharge. You're going to want a Rapier or a Ruby. Despite the fact that Krieg does suffer reduced melee damage at 50% melee damage guns, depending on what his level is, the Ruby still gives you a nice amount of health regen when you hit something, so it's still a nice weapon to have. You'll want a good rocket launcher in case of worst case scenario, fight for your lives. But you can choose any weapon you want that'll suit your style, especially if you don't want to emphasize staying in Buzz Axe Rampage, which I don't really know why you would if you're looking at this skill tree, but again, most of the time, you'll probably want a weapon that'll be nice when you're fighting to get back into your Buzz Axe Rampage. Anyway, this is basically the build. It stresses versatility, which is what I personally love in tree builds. It gives you the option of survivability. It gives you the option of extreme melee damage. You could spec it around a little bit differently depending on the situation, of course, but have a look. Look at this nice amount of blood explosion here. This is the most fun part of the build. Anyway, try it out. Let me know what you think. Try out all factions of it. See you later.